medicine as an art, as the Venn diagram where art overlaps science. It's been my obsessive preoccupation for nigh on 20 years. And then a board of suits. Who wouldn't know lupus from ankylosing spondylitis? Can just revoke your license like that. I mean, listen to this, right? Okay. So, when a patient presents, they deliver a chief complaint. And here's the description of how that complaint should be taken in by the physician. This should be a brief statement of the symptom or symptoms for which the patient is seeking medical care, using his own words wherever possible. It doesn't even pretend. There's not his/her. There's not she, none of that, just his. Pain is frequently the presenting symptom. Other common symptoms are fever, chills, malaise, headache, sore throat, cough, breathlessness, palpitations, vomiting, diarrhea, etc. It's best to avoid vague expressions such as stomach trouble, bronchitis, or bladder trouble. Find out what the patient really means. Terms such as pain after eating, chronic cough and blood spitting, or painful urination, those are more specific. Diagnostic terms such as asthma, gallstones, they should be avoided. Makes sense. The patient with asthma may have chest pain, may have cough, wheezing, other asthmatic symptoms that could be due to an entirely different illness. So the present illness. This is basically an amplification of the chief complaint. Should begin with the first symptom, which seems pertinent, etc., etc. Progression of symptoms, the time of admission, use dates, not day of the week, simple stuff. Include not only the symptoms which are present, but make specific statements concerning the absence of symptoms commonly accompanying the disease which the patient seems to have. This is very basic differential diagnosis kind of stuff here. You know. For example, I mean, if a disease is suspected, there's no need to state no colic or cramps, no smoky, bloody urine, unless that's remarkable in some way. This is, why am I reading this to you? I go over this stuff, if not daily, certainly weekly, and the absurdity of it sometimes gets to me. But enough about me. You're here. Hi. Let's see, you, oh, a direct referral. What do you know? Your primary physician could not figure out what was wrong with you. And I have to admit, I'm surprised that she would refer you to me. So, full disclosure, I have no license. The AMA revoked it. Prior to that revoking, my name was Dr. Edward Prince, and I suppose now my name is just Mr. Prince. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it. You may wonder, as I would if I were in your situation, why your doctor, who could not figure out what was wrong with you, would send you to someone like me, who is technically no longer a doctor. And I'll tell you why. The FDA, the AMA, the FDA, all of these federally administered bodies move like cruise ships, like pleasure craft, oversized, underpowered, not meant to maneuver in any sort of way that might require agility or evasion. There's a very common business methodology. It's called Agile, and one of the reasons that it's adopted in a lot of tech companies is because it's purportedly a better way to deal with the constant change, the changing nature, and the speed at which things change in a fast-paced industry. Medicine has not yet learned the lesson that it too needs to be able to adapt, much like Google or smaller startups. There are no larger. But that is a fundamental failure on the part of the medical community writ large, to realize the precarious position that it puts itself in by not being able to pivot in the face of mountains of data that we are receiving at an exponentially increasing rate, and that we're able to interpret via machine learning and other methods much faster than when we used to have to wait for a paper to be published. And if you, or someone else, not you, as a doctor, were to act on information that you knew to be accurate, that had yet to go through the labyrinthine process of obtaining approval by, the masses, which can take years, decades, especially in the United States, you run the risk of having your license revoked. You may have heard, it made the news. It's been in the news sort of off and on the past couple of years about this first head transplant. That endeavor is doomed to fail. And yet, it is, in my opinion, incredibly important that it move forward. There's this adage, and it's used across all industries, of fail often and fail early. That is the mother of innovation. That breeds and tests and foolproofs and develops new methodologies. Whereas if you're getting your methodologies from a book principles of organic chemistry. Textbook of medicine, books that are updated, yearly, surely, but that's still not fast enough. And often the changes that are made in a given year don't make it into the next year's edition or the year after that. It takes much longer because nobody wants to. It's much better all around to be slow than to be wrong. That's the conventional wisdom. It's not a view I agree with or take lightly. So your fine doctor, and she's a perfectly fine doctor, sent you to me. I have had to adopt unorthodox methods in order to deal with my current situation vis-a-vis the AMA. I can't prescribe you medications. I can't order lab work. I can't have a medical assistant. These are all things that I have to sort of perform ad hoc and get done myself. Fortunately, my major in college, and it was really this that brought me to medicine and not the other way around, was organic chemistry and chemistry in general. Stoichiometry, going to more organic stuff. The idea of reactants and products, and I'll admit it, at one point, the idea of alchemy has always had a sort of mystical, magical appeal to me. So I never let those abilities slide. And therefore, when the AMA decided that I was doing things too soon, without enough caution, now my opinion differs. Obviously, I'm a very cautious man, and I do nothing without a great deal of deliberation and introspection. If anything, I believe I overthink. But that's not the way the various bodies controlling medicine see it in the United States. And although I am in the process of, possibly transferring my license, I'm more hopeful that upon review I will be reinstated. So it takes a measure of courage to refer a patient to me, and it takes a measure of courage as a patient to come to me, and I applaud you for that bravery. Likewise, it takes a measure of bravery to be me, so I don't want to downplay that point either. I'm pretty good. So, if I may, I'm just going to review the notes that your physician sent over. Possibly take a few of my own. I'm going to have to I'm going to have to probably, I hope this doesn't bother you, repeat a few basic tests. Not that I don't trust your doctor, but I, like I said, due diligence is sort of my thing. And I just want to be sure that every step of the way, I have to take on all this responsibility myself, like I said. So please don't take this as a sign of me not trusting your referring physician, because regardless of her inability to diagnose your illness, I hold her in the highest esteem. Okay, so think of me as your doctor come chemist come lab technician, a sort of one-stop shop for all your biological needs, if you want to do it that way. Medicine has become so fragmented in recent years. Okay, so pain. Pain is whether it's psychological or physical, or gives the appearance of being physical when it in fact is psychological, or seems physiological or psychological and turns out being physiological. Pain is one of the great equalizers, I believe it's one of the reasons that we as humans generally feel sympathy, because we've all at one time or another felt pain, and we don't envy anybody unless we're psychopath or sociopath going through pain. But pain is such a broad thing. So I'm going to need to just get a little more detail on the nature of your pain. Give me a moment. All right. So, how old are you? I don't need your date of birth. It doesn't need to be that specific. And your approximate height and weight. No fibbing. Okay. I'd say that appears about right. Now, I could go into sort of a probing, deep family medical history, but that isn't really needed. What we really need to know is, as you might have picked up when I was reading what your chief complaint is, what's pertinent to what's going on now. So, if you could, whether it be your parents, your siblings, I don't need to know if they're alive or dead. I just want to know if there's anything in your family history that you think might be pertinent to the symptoms you're experiencing and have been experiencing. Well, that could be pain. Look, pain is a problem, and it is a symptom, and it also creates symptoms. Pain causes sleeplessness, which can cause fatigue. There's a domino effect going on there, and You may have pain that's the source is innocuous. That's a possibility. Generally, when we find a patient who is experiencing nonspecific pain or pain where we cannot trace the origin, we become, and by we I mean the medical community, becomes suspicious. We start to think about things like cancer, which I'm sure you have no reason to want to think of, but that might be a pertinent bit of information to give me if you have a family member who has suffered from cancer. No. Speaking of which, how are you sleeping? You have to forgive my stomach. I've been drinking black coffee all day. It's basically my diet is coffee and the occasional Nilla wafer. I should take my own advice, but I don't. Let's do as I say, not as I do. Any trouble sleeping? Of course. Of course. How can you sleep when you're in pain? Right? Sleep is great relief from pain, but getting there is the hard part. Right? Now, there's the question of where your pain is, but there's also the question of where your pain goes. Namely, does it radiate? Do you feel like it has a source and then sort of expands out, lessening in intensity as it expands? Or is it very acute and localized? Well, that's quite important. Quite important. Sudden onset. Getting worse, steadily worse. Would you say in a linear or more of an exponential curve? Do you feel twice as bad as you did last week, or 4 times as bad? Yeah, gradual, linear curve. That's preferable, believe me. Okay. And would you describe this pain as dull or sharp? Hot? Hot. Okay. Yeah. It's valid. These are all, look, language is a barrier. It's one of the largest barriers that exists in the medical community. And it is, especially English, is not particularly good at pinpointing. There are words, there are much more specific words for a lot of things in most other languages, most other non-Romance languages, than we have. So we're limited in that way, and we have to assemble what we can and measure that against the data that we have. So yeah, any hot, and any adjective you can think of could be pertinent. It might not be, but it could be. All right. Have you been running a fever? She said you had. On and off, spike during the day. That's odd. certainly significant. I mean, everything you have told me up until this point has been significant. And I'm taking it very seriously. So, I don't need a board to tell me how to do my job. I don't need a board to tell me to care about other human beings and to use my experience and my knowledge and the data that I still have access to thanks to childhood or teenage habit of mine of doing a little bit of hacking. So I still have access to all the databases that I need to get this latest data. And as I mentioned, it does change. It does change. Just duplicating a repository and saving it locally would only be useful to me for a week before I'd have to start doubting any decisions that I made based on that data. Data is life at this point. I mean, it always has been. But we've only just recently gotten to the point where we can capture it in a way that we can use to save lives and make life better. Check. So, as I mentioned to you before, one of the benefits of coming to someone like me is that instead of you coming to visit me for a consult, and then maybe I refer you to a specialist, and then maybe you go to a specialist, and that specialist has an initial visit, and then they schedule some tests, and then you come back for the tests, then you wait for someone else to interpret that, to get the data for the tests and send it back to the specialist who then interprets the tests. Or often the test will be interpreted by the radiologist, or depending on the nature of the test. And in that case, your specialist is really just reading you the results. At that point, you've gone through 2, 3, 4, 5 separate doctors. And, it's great for insurance billing. It's great for lining the pockets of big pharma and big insurance and, doctors too. But it's not what's best for you. What would be best for you is you walk into a doctor's office when you don't feel well. And when you leave that office, you know what the problem is, and you have a treatment for that problem. That would be ideal. But this fragmentation of medicine and the refusal by the medical community to acknowledge its own shortcomings is disturbing, sad. It's sad, is what it is. Anyway. Okay. I think I have enough information. As I mentioned, I would like to perform some of the tests that your referring doctor performed as well. Yeah, this is an old-style medical bag, and you won't find anything in here that doesn't have a very real and practical use. It is broad more than deep, but that is why doctors have brains. If a doctor relied solely on apparatus, machines, even intelligent machines, to diagnose, then we would be in a pretty sorry state. Maybe one day, and I'm not the type of doctor person. I'm no Luddite. I embrace change, and I do see a day when the Star Trek medical tricorder will instantly diagnose any human ailment, and, to a reasonable extent, cure and treat that ailment. But we're not there yet. All right. Let's start with the basics. I just want to listen to your heart. And try to be as relaxed as you can. And I just need some deep, slow breaths. And I'll breathe with you. One moment. A couple more deep breaths, please. Sounds like I'm sighing in frustration. And I probably am. Okay. When you think about it, our entire purpose is to keep blood flowing through the carotid arteries to feed our brains. We don't have a redundant heart, although it is a wonderful machine. It's not like kidneys. There's not a backup. And there are many who dismiss cardiology as a specialty, saying that it's the equivalent of being sort of a mechanic. But I don't think they truly appreciate the subtlety and beauty of the human heart and all that it can do and all that it contains. This is a very, very simplified model of a heart. But you can see, obviously, the veins that feed the muscle, the aorta, through which the blood that keeps your body moving is all pumped through this hook. And you might say to yourself, there's so much power with every beat of your heart. Immediately goes into a hose that then turns in a 90-degree angle. What sort of stress does that put on this vessel? And the answer is, a huge amount of stress, which is the cause of so many things like aortic dissection. Take this apart here for a moment. Take a look at everything here. The ventricles, the atria, the lovely, if less than perfect, mitral valve, pulmonary valve here. The series of electrical impulses that travels through these walls to make the heart pump in the proper order. Every beat is a miracle, and it beats 100,000 times a day. I'm amazed by it to this day. And under here, I can't really see it because of this thing, but you can probably see this vessel right here, which is the one they call the widowmaker. So called because it is very difficult to observe diagnostically because of its location, and yet it is so essential to heart function that frequently the cause of sudden cardiac death is a sclerotic anterior widowmaker clog. But you'll be happy to note that the amount of information that a physician can get by merely listening to the heart, especially if they know what they're listening for, is huge. Huge. And your heart sounded strong, confident, and beautiful. So while I wouldn't take that as the same level of endorsement as if you had had a cardiac stress test or a nuclear cardiac stress test, I think you can probably rest easy that your heart is not the source of these problems, unless we're talking metaphorically, in which case, who knows? I can't tell you. Only you can answer that. I'm going to take a look in your ears now. The phrase, as above, so below, has great meaning and is very true and very useful. And there's a lot that you can see by looking into an ear. That would be indicative of other more troublesome ailments. I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing there. So I'd like to clear away some of the small, minute hairs, as well as some of the larger ones, so that we can really kind of get a look. That's just, well, this is simple. Just going around the edge of the ear. And even closer to the ear itself. So we can really get a good look. Although my initial examination didn't show anything of concern. Just let me know if any of this hurts or is of bother. It shouldn't. That's wonderful right there. Oh. I've nicked your ear a bit. I apologize. We can take care of that quite easily. Using a simple surgical suture. Now this might look a little frightening, but I promise you it is of no, you'll feel nothing. And we'll just take a moment to ensure that you feel nothing. Quick jab of anesthetic. Hold your breath for a moment. Perfect. Over here. You all right? Alcohol pads. Be sure that everything is nice and sterile. There we go. Now, if you feel anything at all, please let me know. As I said, you shouldn't feel a thing. Let me get very close here. There we go. Do you feel that? And a couple more. There's not any blood. I think one more, we should be fine. And put that through so we can tie it off. Et voila. Done. We still have to do your other ear. You'll note that I'm in the habit of showing you everything as I do it. I think a lot of medicine could benefit from being more open about procedures as they're doing them. And your other ear is already sterile, so we don't need to worry about that. You shouldn't feel any of this. And through again. This one is smaller. And one more should do this. There we go. And tie that off as well. Pull the rest of the way through. Tie you off. I just need to trim. And finally, just a bit of medical tape to seal the deal. It's quite difficult to pick an edge off this tape with gloves on, but I've done it before. Although I may not be able to do it again. I may need some assistance. The assistance of an ungloved hand. Here is one of those places that moves and flexes a lot. Like the joint of a finger, bandages. fixed quite firmly. Come right off. That should do it. Let's not leave this little fella out of the game. Another one of the advantages, as you might have noticed, of my tenuous position is that I don't get a lot of patients, and therefore I'm not obliged to adhere to the same script. And that should do that one. I apologize. But now we can look in the ears with no obstructions apart from the tape and the sutures, and see what's going on inside of them. And this one looks marvelous. As is this one. One might argue that we didn't need to go through that process at all, but it is only through these stringent sort of protocols that we can eliminate everything. And as I mentioned, as above, so below. And a problem with your ears could indicate something far greater. I'm going to put this down. If you have wait a moment, I'll be right back and we'll continue. We're almost done with the physical exam, and things are looking good so far. I'll be right back. I apologize for the interruption. Now I'm just going to shine a light in your eyes, observe your pupillary reactions, dilations, contractions, etc., and see what information we get from that. Okay? So really just stare right at the light and follow it. Very good. Right there in the center. Excellent. Just look straight ahead, right at the tip of my nose. That should be easy, as it's prodigious. And look right at my ear. This ear. Excellent. Just going to take some notes on what I've found. Now, I assume all these tests were done already. I'm reluctant to come to a conclusion without some blood work. So I hope that you're okay with that. Like I said, I can't send blood samples to labs or anything like that. They'll refuse my requests outright. But I can do it all right here. So you don't have to be fasting. It's not that kind of blood test. Are you okay with needles? Do you have a problem with them? Oh. It is generally true what they say about physicians and nurses. Nurses are generally much better at drawing blood. In fact, medical assistants, nurses, PAs, they're all generally better at drawing blood just by the sheer amount of practice that they've had. However, like I've said, I'm rather unusual in that respect, and I've done this quite a bit, so I'm fully confident that I can take your blood without there being any pain. Be nothing more than a slight pinch. Are you okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'm going to start just by tying a rubber tubing around your upper arm. We use your left arm. And, just hold it out, extended. Thank you. I'm going to pull that kind of tight. There we go. And then if you could just pump your hand in a fist like that for me. That's what I want to find a good vein. That's one right there. That's perfect. Okay. Just be a moment. And just hold still. Hold your arm. There we go. Is that bad? Oh, it's nothing. You don't even have to look. It's fine. Okay. Just a few more seconds. Okay, a little more. Okay. And that is all. I'll give you some gauze. Alright, if you could just hold this against there, bend your elbow up. Okay, and just stay like that for a couple minutes. Do you feel alright? Okay, excellent. And I'm sure you'll be happy to know that we're done with the examination portion of our visit. And all that remains is the diagnostic portion. And for that, now, have my coffee. We have your blood, which, as you may have noticed, it's not exactly the normal way that we would store blood, but there's nothing really normal about this visit, is there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a few tests on your blood, and when we're done, we will know. One, two, three, four. Whoops. One more there. One, two, three, four. One, two, three, four. One, two. One, two, three, four. One, two, three, four. I want to get a little extra. There's nothing wrong with a little extra. Okay. So I'm sure you took basic chemistry in high school or what have you. So I'm going to do some tests on this blood. I'm going to examine it in my microscope here, and we'll be able to come to a diagnosis, be able to administer a treatment, and all in one visit. And you didn't have to spread it out over many expensive copays and lots of time. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. So, if you'd like to know what we're doing, your blood, in this case, is one of the reactants or possible reactants, and we're going to add some reagents to each of them, starting with a little bit of water. And see if we can elicit certain chemical reactions. And then finally, I'll examine the products of those reactions, or depending on the outcome, this one needed a little extra water because we doubled the blood now. The products of those reactions and we have to do this part before we start adding any other reagents, or it will contaminate. Should I be wearing gloves when I do this? Probably, but I am a maverick. At this point, it's just your blood and water in each of these tubes. I will be adding, like I said, some reagents of my own concoction. And we'll see what we will see. Because I can tell a lot based on these reactions. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is adding fizzly bub. And as its name suggests, it fizzes in the presence of certain chemicals. So I'm going to add some of this. To 1, 2, 3 of the tubes. I'll double up on that. It's fizzly bub. To some of these others, the remainder of these, I'm going to add this. This is physiderm. Is actually quite different from fizzly bub. As you can see, I have a sort of surgical spoon that I will use here to scoop out. Now this will go into every other. Oh my gosh, it's reacting already. That is quite interesting. Let's take a closer look at this. And already I've learned something. Something I suspected, but nonetheless. react in quite the same way. Oh, there it goes, there it goes. It just took a moment. So you can see all of these reacted to greater or lesser extents. Neutralize that. And now, another one of my own concoctions. Looks rather nefarious, but I promise you it isn't. Quite different from Fizzly Bub. But again, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We may have an overflow. Look at that. That is something to behold. Let's see if that happens to all of them. Because it shouldn't. Oh, but it is. No, see? Nowhere near as much. And this one also. Although I suspect if we were to add some more, that might get us where we need to be. Perhaps a tad more Fizzly Bub. I find chemistry to be so very fascinating. Well, so the results were, again, I'm just neutralizing this here, were close to what I expected, but not quite. And the one that reacted most virulently is the one that I really want to have a look at, a closer look at under the microscope. So, let's take our friend. And you see we only need very little. Very small amount. We have our slides. I'm just going to put a single drop between the two slides. Place it here. And we can then move this out of our way. Very carefully, of course. Make sure these are sealed. Because I am excited at what we might find under the microscope. Oh my goodness, I'm going to need something here, a tool to assist me. Wow. That is remarkable. Yes, well, it is rather as I expected and have suspected, not since you got here, but since shortly after you arrived. I believe that what you have is an unusual but not unprecedented case of methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, known in hospital medical circles as MRSA. It is also called the flesh-eating bacteria. There's a lot of very sort of negative names surrounding it. But I don't believe that it is the horror that it has been made out to be by the mainstream modern medicine. In fact, if we could take a moment here and just look at it. So, methicillin resistant. Staphylococcus aureus. Sounds bad. And in many cases it is bad. But I like to treat it using a therapy that I've come up with on my own that I call acroanotherapy. It's essentially the method of taking an acronym and treating it with its anagram. So you can see if we take the first letter, in fact the initials of MRSA, and we take the aureus, put it up here, take the staphylococcus, put it here, take the methicillin, put it here, and take the resistance and put it here. We are left with another acronym, and that acronym is ASMR. This pen is running out. ASMR, as you probably know, stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. And I think with the proper amount of ASMR administered, that it will cure you of your MRSA. So that is my diagnosis, and my recommended treatment is that you go home, listen to as much ASMR as you can find. It's available on YouTube, which I believe is a popular video watching platform with the kids. Search for ASMR. I believe you need to wear headphones when listening to ASMR. And you might even find some ASMR on the very channel where you're watching this video. I'm not sure about that. But I think if you listen to enough, it will cure your MRSA. So, I hope that you're satisfied. Like I said, my methods are unorthodox, but we get there in the end. And I would not recommend this treatment for you if I didn't have 98.9% confidence in its efficacy. And if you do find out after a few weeks that you're still not responding to ASMR therapy, please come back and watch this video again. I think that'll do it.